Hi everyone. By the end of this class, you'll be able to express your feelings towards traveling to other countries. You'll learn how to use noun phrases to do this. So let's get started by me asking you a few questions which you should be able to answer with no problems at all by the end of this class. When traveling to another country, would you be nervous about being far away from your family? Would you feel insecure about traveling alone? Would you be enthusiastic about making new friends? By the end of this class, you'll be able to use noun phrases which contain relative clauses in order to express your ideas when it comes to traveling. So let me present some structure at this particular moment. What we're going to try to do is we're going to try to make sense of these noun phrases which contain relative clauses. First, we'll start talking a little bit about how we use this as the subject. Then we'll move into the object. Probably the object, I'll separate this into a different lecture. So in order to form this kind of expressions, first we're going to have a subject. So in this case, this subject becomes one thing. Then this is followed by a relative clause, I really miss. And then we're going to have the verb to be. In this case, as you can see, is the verb to be is. And then that's followed by an object or a phrase, if you will. So let's write that specific sentence down, and then we're going to try to make sense of it, as I mentioned. So let me do that at this point. Okay. All right. So as I mentioned, one thing becomes the subject of the sentence. I've colored that in green so we can see the difference between what's a verb and what's a subject, what's a relative clause, what's a verb, and what's the object of this particular idea. Then this is followed by the relative clause. I colored this in blue so you can see what I'm referring to as a relative clause. And then the verb to be. Now the verb to be needs to match with the subject, if you will. So if the subject were to be plural, then this should change to are. And then it's followed by the object of the sentence. So in this case, my mom's cooking is the object of the sentence. What we're going to do right now is we're going to include a lot of relative clauses so that you can see that this topic can become a little bit confusing, but if we understand this structure, it shouldn't be difficult to complete. So let me include lots of relative clauses, all right? And what we're gonna do is we're gonna try to make sense of it, but we're gonna try to make different sentences with them, all right? So I mentioned one thing. You could express this idea by saying something, right? You could also say two people, or you can say two things, or you can say two things that I miss would be, and then you mention what those things are. But let's try to make sense of it here. Um, so one thing I really miss is my mom's cooking. So I've included a few relative clauses, and let me get you to answer this by me asking you the question. So what would you be nervous about when traveling to another country? What would you be anxious about? What would you be comfortable with? What would you be curious about? What would you be enthusiastic about? What would you be fascinated by? Let's say that we choose the country, maybe France, all right? So France seems like a very touristic place, and I think that a lot of people would like to travel to this particular country. So let's do that second one. One thing I'd be nervous about is, all right, that's gonna follow the verb to be, and maybe for me is getting lost. All right, let me try to keep the format a little bit because I want you to notice that we have one thing is the noun, the relative clauses I'll be nervous about. Then this is followed by the verb to be, and then this will be followed by the object of the sentence. Okay, so for me, one thing I really be nervous about, or one thing I'll be nervous about, is getting lost. One thing I'll be anxious about is getting to know this new city. One thing I'll be comfortable with is the weather. One thing I'll be curious about is learning about the country's culture. One thing I'd be enthusiastic about is learning the new language. One thing I'll be fascinated by is getting to know the history behind the architecture in that particular city. And so you get the idea. So if we follow this pattern, subject plus relative clause plus verb to be plus the object, then we shouldn't have any difficulties expressing these ideas. Just one last thing that I would like to mention, that if I change the subject to plural, okay, I will need to change the verb to be, and I will also need to change the object because both things need to be plural. They need to match with whatever the subject is. So for example, two things I really miss are my mom's cooking and my room at home. Okay, that's just to give you an example. And if the subject changes to something plural, then you will need to do the same for the rest. So what I would like for you to do now is to practice this concept, but now answer this in your own way. So what would you be nervous about? What would you be anxious about? What would you be comfortable with? And try to give as many responses as you possibly can. Try to write these ideas down, as this will help you learn this concept.